Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Hundreds of world leaders and climate experts gathered at this year's United Nations Climate Conference to witness the approval of a climate disagreement on transitioning away from fossil fuels, while countries faced crushing assessments of their carbon emissions. States attending the 2023 Conference of the Parties, or COP28, were under pressure to adopt a new climate agreement amid controversy over the appointment of Sultan Al Jaber as president because of his position as a United Arab Emirates oil tycoon and his alleged questioning of climate science. Countries are also found to be falling behind in the first review of their progress towards reducing to keep global warming in check. Nigeria was well represented at the COP28 with a full delegation led by President Bola Tinubu. Joining us now on the morning show is Mustapha Audu, an All Progressives Congress chieftain and a maker of electric vehicles. Good morning, Mr. Audu, and welcome to the morning show.
Well, Mustapha, good to see you.
Good morning. How are you?
I understand that you were...
Great to see you.
You were in Dubai at COP28.
Yes, absolutely.
Did you go as part of the federal government delegation, or you went with an NGO, or you were there in your own capacity as a businessman? So that we'll know where we'll take the questions from.
Capacity as a businessman.
Okay.
We've been working in the aspect of climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and resilience for several years. And we've been speaking at different COP conferences, and this was no different. But we went there on our capacity as a business entity making electric vehicles in Nigeria.
Okay, two things coming out of that, COP28. Historic agreement at the end of the day. For the first time, 130 countries signed up to the agreement that the countries of the world will transition away from fossil fuels. But there was no agreement as to the use of the phrase phase down, phase out. Those phrases were not used. But even then, 39 island countries under the umbrella of Association of Small Island States, Singapore, Comoros, the Pacific Islands mostly, all then came around and said they were not in the room when that decision was taken and that it was not in their interest. So there was still some division. But there's that other deal, the Loss and Damage Fund, to which quite a number of countries made pledges. So do you think that it was a success or a partial success or just window dressing? Not much has changed.
First of all, good morning, Nigerians. I think to me it was successful based on the reasons why we went there. The Conference of the Parties, COP as we know it, is essential for making commitments towards reduction of temperature to pre-industrial levels, which is 1.5 degrees. So you have to adapt certain technologies, certain software to be able to accomplish these goals. And some of them were agreed to, but I see why the island nations were not really happy. They feel the full effects. Among the major effects of climate change, as we know, is the rising sea levels. And those in the islands feel those effects the most, especially when there's flooding, those seasons where there's heavy rains, monsoons, it affects them tremendously. We can also see that in Nigeria, we feel a lot of these side effects, in states like Kogi, Benue, during the flooding and rainy season. So you can see the effect of climate change and why those ones would object that the haven't gone far enough. But in reality, you have to give countries time to be able to adapt to new technologies, to be able to change the mindset of their investment. So if you also look at Nigeria as well, you have to look at what exactly we set out to achieve. Some of the people that went there achieved great goals, while others, I wouldn't say the footpath has been set properly. So you have a point of alignment there that you can see how to set goals and agenda properly for agencies, especially if you understand the reasons why this is very important. Because if you look at for example, solar radiation in Nigeria. Nigeria has some of the best in the world. So investing in these technologies will help in places like rural areas, semi-urban areas, places that you have the poorest of the poor dwelling there. So how do you bring the effects of development technology to these people so that they can at least have a better level of living? So those are the critical questions. And if your agency, if your country is fulfilling those goals, then I think it's a tremendous success. But if you're not fulfilling, then I think there's a roadmap there that is possible for you to develop.
All right. In what was described by the president of COP28, Mr. Al-Sabah, as historic, they finally decided on a language, like had been mentioned, transition away. So they have agreed, at least to it, even though it's not legally binding, that countries have agreed to transition away from fossil fuel. I'd like to bring you back home to the Nigerian context, especially because you play in the electric vehicle space, and what this means for us. Even though we're not anywhere close to the largest emitters or the guilty when it comes to carbon emissions or fossil fuel emissions, but Nigeria is still part of the bigger conversation. One is, what does this mean for your organization? How many years do you think Nigeria would be able to transition away from fossil fuels? And then bearing the fact that we're also a producer of energy, of crude oil. So this impacts us as well in terms of revenue generation. Is it time for us to begin to think alternatively as the world is transitioning away from fossil fuel?
Thank you. I think that's a very important question. It's important to note that Nigeria, especially Africa, is always key at leapfrogging technology. It's in our DNA. If you look at the telecoms, for example, look at Glo, MTN, Nigeria has leapfrogged the rest of Asia and the world. If you look at fintech as well. So if you look at it from that perspective, this is an opportunity for Nigeria to leapfrog the world by making the right investment decisions. Nigeria has to develop its own Glo, its own MTN. In the renewable energy sector, it has to develop its own LG. So this is the opportunity that Nigeria needs by investing in local companies, not by the government agencies themselves going to partner with foreign companies. That is not thinking like a nationalist. If we think like nationalists, then we have to develop the local content. So if you look at states like Borno, for example, they're doing a brilliant job. Kaduna had one of the best presentations at COP, and you can see that they have a target towards it. You can see that the governor of Borno State has already deployed electric vehicles as taxis. So these are the kind of forward-thinking initiatives that need to be made. There's a $2.3 billion transaction for Sun Africa for solar, generating energy from solar, electricity from solar, over 2,000 megawatts. Yet these projects have stalled over a long period of time. So if government takes interest to make sure that, and this is being funded by the US Exim Bank. The last project that was funded by the US Exim Bank is the Kanji Dam, and that is our biggest producer of electricity today and the most functional. So you can see that if we invest in the right projects, if our heads of agencies and ministries take active steps, because I was witness to several ministers who took extremely active steps in trying to create pathways for their constituents. For example, the Minister of Women Affairs, who I think did a fantastic job there, negotiating several deals that are beneficial to the women. So if you take active proactive roles and steps in trying to bring in the right transaction for people, then it's critical. So if we don't develop our local economy, then for us, this is going to be just rhetoric. So if you look at government right now is investing in CNG buses. CNG is transition energy. So with CNG buses, yes, Nigeria has gas, but we don't have the infrastructure to deploy CNG buses. By investing in that infrastructure, we're investing in now. In 5 years, nobody in the world is going to be producing CNG buses. So Nigeria is stuck with CNG buses. Meanwhile, we generate more income if we pipe our gas to Morocco, to Europe, where there's a gas issue right now, and Nigeria can generate tremendous amount of revenue from gas because they use gas to generate heat, and it cools water and creates your heating in Europe. So this is how we generate income from our gas and our crude oil, while still investing and being able to leapfrog the technology. Because right now, for us, we have a lot of orders from African countries. But we obviously, because we don't have, or we've not had the right support until recently, and I have to say that several states and several ministries have really done a great job at COP in investing in several local businesses to develop that sector, especially in e-mobility. We were there together with other companies. Audu has taken a lead as well in there, Phoenix, as well as ourselves, EMVC. So we have taking active role, and we're seeing certain agencies, certain governors taking key interest in trying to develop this sector. So it's very important for us to look inwards. Meanwhile, there are other agencies that have more focused in maybe traveling, trying to secure deals with foreign companies rather than local companies. It doesn't make any sense. It is better if those agencies want to partner with foreign companies, partner with the local company and give the condition that the local company must partner with the foreign company of choice. That way you're developing the local sector. But by government agencies going to partner with foreign companies to develop critical mineral sectors or to develop critical sectors that are important to new technologies such as solar panels, electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries, what you're doing is involving government again in managing business. Government has a track record around the world of not being able to manage business. So I think that if some of our leaders in office, just some of them, think like nationalists, if they think of developing the local industry, then the local industry can now partner with the foreign company on condition of knowledge transfer, developing skills, building large factories, being able to get the benefits so that it's not just about rhetorics. We are tired as a business. We're tired of listening to the big numbers because the big numbers have huge conditions that only governments can help you meet these conditions. And if you look, it's not unnatural. If you look at Tesla, the largest EV manufacturing company in the world, they have a $6.5 billion contract from NASA. They have a $2.5 billion contract from the US government. They just recalled 1 million vehicles to change them, electric vehicles, to change the auto drive system. No company can recall 1 million vehicles and survive, yet they're doing it with ease. That is because they're being backed, like all other major US companies are being backed by the US government. So Nigerian leaders in different positions, because the reason why Mr. President has appointed the team is so that the team can look inwards, can think nationally. We have a lot of problems, and climate change provides us an opportunity to industrialize. So by climate change adaptation, mitigation, and avoidance, there are technologies there that can be developed for the benefit of Nigeria. And the most important thing is that there are things called critical minerals. Critical minerals are essential in everyday technology for now and for the future. Nigeria is filled with tremendous amount of critical minerals. We must develop the critical mineral sector. Nigeria has the best solar radiation in Africa and one of the best in the world. Let us develop the solar sector and invest in companies that build solar home systems such as A-Solar, Oxano, who develop solar panels. We must invest in these kind of companies to change the Nigerian story and to improve the welfare of our people.
Well, Mustapha, money was a big subject at COP28. You've talked about climate adaptation, but adaptation finance is a big concern. Yes. Where will the money come from?
Yes.
And who will manage it and all of that? Well, the money flow has been very slow. The finance target is about $100 billion per annum. But, nobody has been able to meet that target, and the expiration date for that is 2025. So at this COP28, we had some of the countries making pledges to the Loss and Damage Fund. And the biggest donation to the Green Climate Fund the pledge came from the US, $3 billion pledge. And to the Loss and Damage Fund, the US also pledged $7 million, the smallest in the package in that direction. But the issue is private sector, stakeholders, and governments, they make these pledges at every COP. Do you think that the Western world or the North generally is really sincere about this transition that we seek and supporting the countries of the South and the affected countries, suffering from the effect of climate crisis?
Thank you, Ruben. I think that's also important to take note. A lot of pledges have been made. A total of $270 billion was pledged this year for the Climate Green Fund. So you have to look at, which also has to do with the Loss and Damages Fund, you have to look at how to take advantage of this. You cannot just sit down and expect the funding to come to you, or you go there and you access the money without being creative. So, for example, we're part of a company called 3Datex that sets the baseline for emissions measurement. We have some of the best equipment in the world. So what Nigeria can actively do is begin to think critically. Now, we're sitting on a dinosaur. Whether we like it or not, fossil fuels is a dinosaur. The way the world has decided to go is go towards renewable energy. And we have abundance of those resources. Yet we also have abundance of fossil fuels. What do? We use the income, part of the income generated from our fossil fuels, to invest in renewable energy and then export the technology outwards and make a tremendous amount of money from this. It is thinking like a nationalist that is the issue. So if we can develop these sectors, if we can, 100 billion, for example, was channeled towards CNG. Out of that, if you say, okay, you're going to channel 100 billion towards CNG, but you set up another fund, 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion towards electric vehicles and e-mobility, guess what? I assure you that the e-mobility sector where we play would leapfrog the CNG sector, because the development of technology for CNG has reached its limit, while the development of technology for electric vehicles has just begun. So by investing in the future, using our current resources, we always think of looking outwards when we have every single thing we need. We just have to be creative.
All right.
We cannot depend on countries that are already benefiting from fossil fuels to say that immediately they are going to, even when they make pledges, fulfill those pledges so that their fossil fuels becomes obsolete.
Yes.
So what do? Is you take the resources that you're making today and you invest in tomorrow. Like Dubai did with tourism. They took the money they were making from fossil fuels and invested in their real estate.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you so much. No, it's okay. Thank you, Mustapha, for that very insightful conversation. And of course, we look forward to the resolutions from COP28 translating to action here in Nigeria. Thank you.